Thank you, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee. I will firstly introduce the top table. To my left, we have Councillor Sheila McCall, the Vice Convener. I have Elaine Ritchie, the Strategic Lead of Housing and Communities. I have Serge Marone, the Strategic Lead of Economic Development and Planning. And Jessica Guild, who's the Democratic Governance Officer. I could hear a slight rumble of a computer somewhere. That's fine. Thank you. And I ask the clerk to confirm the apologies and the roll call, please.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies today from Bailey Williamson with Councillor Grant Stewart substituting. We've got 3 members online. I'll ask to confirm they're present. Councillor Braun.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor James.
Good morning.
And Councillor Colin Stewart.
Present.
Super. Thank you. All of the members are in the chambers, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I remind councillors and officers joining us virtually to use the chat box to draw my attention, as with those in the chamber as well. Before we begin today's business, I'd like to take a moment to mark the passing of a much loved and deeply respected colleague, Michelle Dow. Michelle dedicated an extraordinary 36 years to Perth and Kinross Council and over 30 years to housing service alone. Since joining the council in 1990, she contributed her knowledge, compassion and unwavering commitment across a number of housing teams. Most recently, she served as our Senior Tenant and Resident Participation Officer, a role she truly excelled. Michelle had a rare gift for putting people at ease, whether she was supporting tenants, advising colleagues, or guiding new members of staff or elected members. She brought warmth, humour and kindness into every interaction. She was generous with her time, always ready to listen, share her experience and help others find their confidence. Her impact on her services and on the people she worked with is immeasurable. Her sudden passing has been a profound shock, and her absence will be felt by many across housing and communities and beyond. Michelle was not only an exceptional colleague, but a friend to so many. Our thoughts are with her husband Sandy, their daughters Ailey and Rachel, who is herself one of our colleagues, at this incredibly difficult time. We hold them in our hearts as they navigate their loss. Today, on behalf of this committee and the wider council, we honour Michelle's extraordinary service, her kindness and legacy she leaves behind. She will be greatly missed. I'm happy for any other member who wishes to comment on this to do so at this time. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for those remarks and that tribute to Michelle. I think we are all shocked and are still shocked and saddened at the news of Michelle's sudden death, and I want to extend sincerest sympathies, as you did, to Sandy and her daughters, Ailey and Rachel. I worked with Michelle for over 20 years on several revisions to the housing allocations policy. I remember how she literally rolled up her sleeves to get stuck into tenant participation and engagement, and her work with the Gypsy Traveller community at Double Dykes and the Gypsy Traveller action plan was particularly valuable. 20 odd years ago, Michelle was one of a cohort of young housing officers who shaped my time as a housing vice convener and convener. She was always someone worth seeking counsel from, and whose views and advice were worth listening to. Indeed, sometimes it was difficult not to listen to them, given how strongly they could be put forward. Working with Michelle was fun. She had a good sense of humour, didn't take fools gladly, and probably much to her regret could be made to blush bright red quite easily. But that was just part of Michelle's fun and charm. Underneath, she had a steely resolve, didn't shy away from tough decisions or elected member challenge. Maybe not quite to the same extent as Elaine Ritchie, but you knew what Michelle thought when she wanted you to think it. And she also had the grit and the tact to deal with tricky situations and the character and values to do the right thing and the drive to see it through. And as you said, we will miss her. And once again, I want to offer sincerest condolences to her family and colleagues, Convener.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thank you, convener, and thank you for the words you've said. They pretty much sum up everything. But I would just like to add, obviously, it goes without saying that we're all shocked by the sudden news of the passing of Michelle. The loss of her being with us will be felt across the council, and I'm sure this committee. However, this pales before the sadness that is now felt by her family. Over time, I'm sure all of us had spoken with her, usually with a problem which she would take on board and do her best to resolve as quickly as possible. A reflection of the dedication of her work here. For me personally, her help and knowledge when I took over the role of convener of the Housing Committee was invaluable. She was always there to answer any question, no matter how trivial, and always with a good sense of humour, which always made things a bit easier for me, as we both knew that she knew a lot more about the job than I ever would. Undoubtedly, the immediate colleagues that she worked with would be shocked by the sadness of the news of her passing, and will miss her being with them as part of their working life. For Michelle's family, any words said at this time can do little to ease the pain of their loss, but hopefully knowing the regard in which we all held her will go some way to be of comfort to them at this time. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. Next on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Thank you. I see nothing in the chat and nobody's indicated in the chamber. So before we go into minutes, I have another item to read out. Pre-election statement to be read by the convener. I want to remind members that the Scottish Parliament elections will take place on the 7th of May 2026, as if our feet and our suntans don't tell us that. And as such, there may be heightened sensitivity around what is said and done in these months leading up to the polls. Broadly, the Local Government Act 1986 prohibits the council from publishing material which is designed to affect public support for a political party or campaign. Normal council business obviously continues, but as always, council resources, staff and facilities cannot be used for political purposes. Any events, publicity or communications promoted by the council must always be politically neutral. Other guidance, if required, is available from the Chief Executive or from the Elections Manager. Thank you. So we move to the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we agree with the minutes of the previous meeting? Sorry, Bailey.
Just with regard to your statement, I didn't think Purda stepped in until the 1st of April.
The information I'm being given is 16th of March was the start date for that. I see no indications about the minutes, so we'll accept the minutes. Agreed. Thank you very much. Now move to the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions anybody has for the outstanding business statement? I see no outstanding business, so we will move that paper as it stands and we will remove completed items from that list into the historic file and move on to the next item. So our first substantial item on the agenda is item 5, Enhanced Community Policing Model. And we have Stephen Gray here who's going to do a presentation on this and then we'll take questions afterward.
Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. As you know, I think I've spoken to most of you before. My name's Steve Gray. I'm one of the community inspectors for Perth and Kinross. Jamie Allen, the local area commander, passes his apologies. He's on a course today which he couldn't avoid, so he's asked me just to go through the enhanced policing or enhanced community policing model, which has just recently come in across Tayside. So that's what I'll do. I'll go through this slideshow. Apologies, I'm not that tech savvy, so hopefully it'll go to plan. I'm just going to have to ask Magda, I think, to forward on the slides as we go through. But happy to take any questions following my presentation if you would like to give me any. So the enhanced community policing model is part of the Policing for Our Communities work stream, which is a national work stream which will help to realise the Chief Constable's 2030 vision. For those of you that aren't aware, the vision for 2030 that the Chief Constable's been quite vocal about is to achieve safer communities, less crime, supported victims and a thriving workforce. So everything in the Policing for Our Communities work stream and the enhanced community policing model is aiming to achieve those or that vision for 2030. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So Policing for Our Communities, as I've said, is linked to the 2030 vision, and it's all about achieving the outcomes that you'll see on the screen, specifically where they relate to the current vision and business plan under Op Evolve. In terms of the strategic alignment, and as well as the Chief Constable's 2030 vision, the Policing for Our Communities programme aligns into the broader joint outcomes of policing. So as you'll see there, part of that is about helping communities to feel safe through accessible policing and visible problem solving. So a big part of this enhanced community policing model is to try and ensure that we do have that enhanced visibility of policing within the communities, and that they are given the time and the space to be a bit more proactive in the communities with, you know, visible problem solving to try and achieve some of those or prevent some of those problems that we see cropping up in the communities. It's about getting the people the right help at the right time, ensuring that we have consistently supported victims through dedicated specialist response, and also empowering staff so that they feel better valued. So that's the Policing for Our Communities objectives and outcomes. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you a little bit about the engagement that is taking place through Police Scotland whilst they're working through the Policing for Our Communities work stream. I won't go through them all, but obviously significant consultation with various bodies, including our workforce, out with benchmarking through other forces and best practice as well, which has led to or has given some direction in relation to the way in which Policing for Our Communities is looking to work. You know, there's been a depth of data validation, academic review and insight just to align those approaches, and gives us the confidence that we've evidenced and informed the design approach. Next slide, please. So I suppose with any change, it's important to understand why we're looking to make that change and what the case for change actually is. And the local policing service delivery team have taken part in external evaluation and staff public engagement, evaluated what the issues with the existing local policing model was, and found that basically it wasn't optimal, I suppose, to achieve the 2030 vision that the Chief is aiming towards. Part of the reason for that is challenges which have been brought about by centralisation, the creation of Police Scotland, resource shortages and shifting priorities. So you'll see up there a number of issues which came to light through that engagement process, not least of which you'll see that the public often struggle to get non-emergency help in a timely and appropriate manner, lack of visibility. We find that we get a lot of abstractions, especially with our community team, which I'll come on to, where the community police are taken away to help with response calls, so emergency calls, which, you know, absolutely we need to do to try and give people the help when they need it. But unfortunately, it leads to a lack of community policing and that ability, and as I said, time and space to be able to deal with the community issues that we're seeing. Another issue that we're facing, and you'll see there, is that we've become a bit more reactive than proactive over time. And again, time, space that we're going to hopefully get for the community teams to make that engagement with the communities, look at joint working and be a bit more proactive in that space. Next slide, please. So as I said, Policing for Communities is a large work stream with a number of parts to it. Obviously today, the enhancing the community policing aspect of it, you'll see there. There's a number of parts to that: investigation and resolution, how we do that, community policing and response policing. The other parts of it, investigations and safeguarding project and local policing support, are still ongoing, but the enhanced community policing has actually landed on the 24th of February, as I said. Next slide. So how are we going to create the time and the space for the community police to make that impact? So we've still got our community policing teams, we've still got our response policing teams. The new part of this model is the community investigation hub. And that's a team. There's one in Perth, one in Dundee and one in Angus, and they are made up of officers who are non-deployable for various reasons, whether that be health reasons or otherwise, and also deployable officers who will put on uniform and go out and note statements and engage with people. Now, the Community Investigation Hub have taken quite a large piece of work away from response and community policing, and that's your non-emergency calls, so things that aren't ongoing and don't need an immediate response. So previously, what would happen is you would call into the control room, they would establish through assessment whether you needed an immediate response. If not, brief details would be taken and, an appointment would be made for a response officer to come and see you, in a few days' time and note statements and deal with it in that respect. What we've decided to do now is we're going to a model where the Community Investigation Hub will take all that work away from the response policing teams and community policing teams. That will allow the response policing teams to purely deal with ongoing calls where an immediate response is required. It will give the community policing teams the space and time to be able to deal with the problems that we're seeing in the communities. It will streamline a wee bit of the work as well, so that people have a wee bit of more of a clearer expectation as to what they're looking to or what they should be doing. And I'm talking about police officers there, whereas before I think there was a wee bit of blurred lines in relation to what is our role, what is our priority, and the creation of the Community Investigation Hub and the clearer defined roles has made that better for everyone, certainly within the policing staff, I would say. What we've seen as well in relation to the new model is that we've a decrease in the number of community officers being taken away to help with response policing, because the Community Investigation Hub have taken a lot of the more minor calls away. It's allowed response policing the time to actually deal with the calls that they should be dealing with. So we don't feel the need or as much of a need to pull community officers across to support response policing. And that is a big part of what we're trying to achieve with this. We're also trying to achieve through those improved work streams and so I suppose more clear guidance on what people should be dealing with is making response policing and uniformed policing a more supportive place to work for our staff, because what part of the feedback was that they didn't feel that response policing was a rewarding place to work. They weren't given the support that they were needing to do the job well, and part of this is all about creating that thriving workforce through better support, more defined roles. As well, it brought into focus, the volume crime demand, and through doing that, it's allowed us to manage more effectively how we resource those demands more efficiently to provide a better quality response to crimes to the public, and ultimately creating the capacity for response policing to do their job and community policing to do their job. As I said, we went live on the 24th of February following the rollout in C Division, which is Central Scotland, who went live slightly earlier than us. Some of the key benefits that we've seen so far is less abstractions from community policing into response, as I've said. We've moved to a model whereby the different wards have dedicated community officers for each ward, which will provide more visibility. There's certainly, now that they're not getting pulled into response calls, I'm asking my team and the other inspectors are asking their teams for the officers to be more visible in their areas, be more proactive in their areas as well. So, you know, whether that be through intelligence that we receive in relation to drug dealing or antisocial behaviour issues in each of the areas, we're trying to be more proactive in that space. And, you know, I think we've got a really good working relationship with the council in Perth and Kinross, and a lot of the things that we're talking about we've already got in place, but I think what we're hoping to achieve is just more capacity for more work from us in relation to that. And, you know, we have the councillor drop-in sessions with the local area commander, which is good, and it just provides that shared awareness of issues. And further to that, we've recently brought in a new antisocial behaviour task force meeting with the police and the Safer Communities team, which has been really positive. And that's just about sharing or having that shared awareness of what the biggest issues are for the council or the Safer Communities team and what our biggest issues are, and trying to find a joint approach to try and tackle them. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So I've already touched on the benefits and outcomes, or some of the benefits and outcomes in relation to certainly the community policing model. But just to sort of solidify on that, it's all about being more visible in the communities to try and promote the feeling of safer communities, try and have less crime through more preventative work and proactive focus, better supported victims through active investigation and resolution, enhancements to our local crime and public protection approaches, and again, a thriving workforce just through better defined roles, enhanced training, better workforce mix, and strengthened frontline teams. Some of that work is still ongoing through the Policing for Our Communities work stream, but certainly the implementation of the new enhanced community policing model is a big step in the right direction for that. And then if we can go on to the next slide, please. We don't want to bring something in and then not evaluate how we're doing. So there's a lot of work from the national team in relation to evaluating the outcomes and how they're achieving the outcomes. And that's just some of the measures that we're putting in place to measure that success and value going forward. So face-to-face engagement, on-site observations through Police Scotland and the SPA, HMICS, we're using all of that as well as external partners, just ongoing work throughout the implementation phase just to ensure that we're achieving what we're setting out to achieve, and we're still providing that service, I suppose, to partners. And that's a really strategic overview, I suppose, of what we're looking to bring in and implement, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions or queries that you have in relation to that.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That was a really good presentation and insight into this. The first question I have is from Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, convener, and thanks for the presentation, Stephen. It was really interesting, and there's a lot in it to, excuse me, take into consideration. The question I'd like to ask is on one of your the earliest slides when you were talking about the outcomes, the 4 outcomes, and one of them was that officers and staffs are enabled and empowered. And then just in the last slide there, under your benefits and outcomes, you said that reinvented community training would be one of the ways in which you would do that. Can you just give us a tiny bit of detail about what that community training will actually involve, what kind of form it will be in? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so we've actually had an uplift in community officers nationally. So whilst we've had community officers in post for a long time, and you know they've got lots of really good experience, we need to upskill the people that are coming into the role as well. So what they've decided to do, and I'm not saying we've neglected community policing over the years, but other areas of policing have received more training than I would say in community. So part of the project is looking at ways in which we can actually roll out courses, if you like, for community policing officers who are new into the role, rather than just relying on best practice and from other officers. And while there's always a place for best practice and experience, I think what's been identified is there needs to be a national almost training of community officers so that we're given the same service across all our communities. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And it sounds like a really welcome development. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks for that interesting presentation, Stephen. I was interested that you've been benchmarking with other forces across the UK, and it made me wonder, is this the way other forces are doing it? Has this become a kind of UK-wide model that Police Scotland are now just adopting?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. So the rollout of policing for our communities is a national project. So at that sort of strategic level, I don't know exactly what forces have similar models or whether we've just taken something and gone with a similar model. What I do know is that obviously Police Scotland have got a national team in place who've been looking at this over a number of months, if not over a year. And although we've benchmarked against other forces, there's been a lot more consultation done with partners, officers, public, and that's helped inform the new enhanced community policing model. It's not just a case of taking what in other places and replicating it here. It's probably, and as I say, I've not been involved in that benchmarking, but what I would assume has happened is that we've looked at what other forces have got, we've taken the best parts of each and tried to implement a Scotland, or what is best for us nationally in Scotland.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Steve, for your presentation. My question is just, I wonder, I think it was on the second or third slide, there was mention of 28 prototypes. I wonder, is it possible just to say a little bit more about what that actually is? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm just trying to see where that 28 prototypes is, but
I think it was either on the second or third slide, I think.
Yeah. Is that the products? I can't see anything about prototypes. Sorry, yeah, I do. 7 frontline workshops, 100 participants and 28 prototypes, 1 local policing model. So again, this is part of the engagement that the national team took out and carried out. So they've obviously gone to a lot of participants had a lot of workshops. They've looked at a number of prototypes and they've come up with the best model that they could see. Now, I don't have any involvement in those prototypes, so unfortunately I can't answer that question.
Okay, I know it's difficult if you haven't been the author of the content of the slides, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. So these two questions are linked, but if you decide otherwise, I will stop. Speeding is a major issue. Award, and we had a meeting with residents yesterday with the local community officer, and he was following very much your line that with community police, and there'll be more availability to be out doing speed checks. So I'm just wondering if you confirm that is the case, that there'll be more officers, community officers now available to do this, because it's a major problem. It's endemic, really. And the second thing that came up from the residents was that they want to report, obviously, a problem. They don't expect an immediate response, but of course they're dialing in on 101. And I just wondered, in all these changes, if there'd be some change to the system for 101 to allow people to get in much quicker, because they were saying they're having to hang on for 20, 25 minutes and effectively just give up. Don't want to dial 999 because obviously not an emergency. It's wrong to do that. But that's another problem is 101. I just wonder if you had any comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor. So on your first point in relation to speeding checks, so we basically take our patrols for speeding from incidents that have been reported through the councillor drop-in sessions. I think we've taken action off the back of information that we've received there, and I think recently we had the firearms officers out assisting with speeding checks throughout Perth and Kinross as well. So yes, part of the enhanced community policing model is to try and free up time for community officers to try and, tackle what we see as the biggest problems. We are aware speeding is a major problem that gets brought up at every meeting that we go to, and yes, we will be looking to proactively tackle speeding in the communities, but it is really important that we're aware of where the problem areas are. So I would just encourage you to continue to feed that in through your local community teams. In relation to the 101 service, I know it's probably slower than people would like. It takes quite a while to get through. I've had first-hand experience of that when I've tried to report something myself, and it is frustrating, especially if we're asking you to do it time and time again. But what I would say is that there are other means of contacting the police when it's not an emergency. You can send an email and somebody will get back in contact with you when that's been read. We've got dedicated community policing email addresses, which if it's a community issue, we're more than happy to take emails into those mailboxes and we'll provide a response.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, convener. The local policing plan expires this year. It was running from 23 to 2026. The priorities there were antisocial behaviour, violent crime and drugs and community policing. And I just wondered if this new community policing model will shift the priorities within the next local policing plan, and if you could tell me how you think that might impact on the next local policing plan.
Yeah, thanks for that. So absolutely, it's about having safer communities and being more visible in the community. We're aware that antisocial behaviour is an issue throughout the country, and I think I touched on that in relation to some of the meetings that we have locally and some of the good work that we do locally, and that I'll be briefing out actually in a Tayside-wide meeting that we have tomorrow. The local policing plan going forward after this one expires, I don't know what the priorities in relation to that are at this time for this meeting, but yes, antisocial behaviour I'm sure will form a part of that, and just helping our communities to feel safer. And I think that all fits in with the 2030 vision, which will take us from 27 up to 2030, and is one of the Chief Constable's priorities. So I don't see a shift in focus away from antisocial behaviour and violent crime.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bailey McLaren.
Thanks, Convener. My question is really sort of more of a broader question. Early days in this new communities policing model, but do you feel, is there a sense of it's positive, results will come through, communities will see the benefit of that? Can you just give me a flavour of that? Thank you.
Thank you. So the overwhelming response from officers at this point, certainly, and we are only 3-4 weeks in, has been positive. They've seen, so now that we've got more defined roles, we've got a team taking care of the calls that are less of a priority, and that's all they deal with, and it allows for them to have much better engagement with the complainers and the victims of those crimes, and provides probably a more tedious update for them, if you like, in response to them. The response policing teams are happier because they are not having to try and deal with the lesser crimes, and are being able to be allowed to respond to calls. So before, I think there was a bit of conflict with the response policing teams. They felt like they weren't giving the communities the response they needed in relation to the lesser crime because they were too busy dealing with the more immediate calls. And I think they feel more comfortable within themselves having that taken away from them, so they can purely look at what is coming in and needs an immediate response. The community teams are better and they're happier at the moment because they aren't being taken away to support that response policing at this point in time as much as what they were before. So they're getting the time to be allowed to concentrate on the community policing aspect. So I think so far it's been good. We are still waiting on resources and posts evening out a bit. So we will see more posts coming to P&K as time goes on and the model beds in, which will be positive for the communities and should provide more visibility going forward.
Thank you. That's really encouraging.
Thank you very much. Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Convener. Partially answered. Well, first of all, I welcome this new approach in principle. I think our societies and policing and resources is always changing, so it's good to sort of revisit and look to bring in where appropriate new models. You mentioned, I think, in your response to your last question, that this has been up and running for the last 3 and 4 weeks. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask. But I guess specifically, as a local councillor, from a evaluation perspective, how will I and communities be able to tell that this is working, and what sort of performance, metrics, for want of a better word, are we going to be able to sort of see, to compare and contrast with what has gone before, and how this, in essence, change to policing is positively impacting the areas that you hope it will improve. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think tangibly, what are we looking to achieve here, and what are you going to feel? And I think what the hope is that your communities will have a more visible presence. As I said, we're looking to implement a model, certainly within Perth and Kinross, where we have a dedicated community officer for each sort of ward area, and the expectation is that they'll be far more visible in those areas. So first and foremost, I would like to see, and I hope that you will see, an increase in the visibility of your local community policing officer. we're looking to try and achieve an increase in the capacity for the officers to attend local meetings. So local community meetings. I know there's been issues in the past whereby you've not had people available to attend your local communities. So I'm hoping that that will change as well. For members of the public, I would expect to see a better service when they contact the police. And that is due to the fact that we now have a team of officers who are dealing with the less immediate calls. So, as I said in my previous answer, I think there was a bit of conflict before, whereby response officers were having to almost neglect those complainers because they were responding to immediate calls, whereas now we've got a dedicated team doing that. So I think at this point in time, more visibility both in your communities and at meetings, and a better response to people contacting the police, and hopefully that will be the tangible impact that you will see.
Okay, thank you. I have a brief follow-up question, if that was appropriate just now. Are you going to sort of soft launch this, to communities so that they understand that there is effectively a change underway?
I think we certainly have been having meetings. I know Jamie Allen has provided further input in relation to the enhanced community model following the go live date. I know that Karen Judge has been in contact with some of the communities in the Safer Communities team in Perth and Kinross and told them about the rollout. I'm trying to think, I'm not entirely sure if the commander put anything out in the most recent, or one of the most recent newsletters that we put out in relation to the new model. But it's certainly something that I can speak to the Chief Inspector about and look to probably enhance our comms going forward, our communications going forward. Is that a specific issue that you think needs addressed, and we've maybe not communicated it enough to the local communities?
No, I was curious as to how you were looking to sort of promote the positive change which you've outlined you're hoping to achieve. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Inspector Gray, for this presentation. This is extremely welcome, I think, and so I commend the police service locally for moving forward with this. But my question really is around what consideration has been given to the geography and rurality of Perth and Kinross when implementing this model. I can see it working well in the cities, but I'm not sure it will work further afield. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, having worked here now for the best part of 4 or 5 years, I'm well aware of the issues that the geography of Perth and Kinross causes, and having worked in Dundee before, it's just not it's a non-issue there. So certainly from all the communications that we've had and the engagement that we had prior to the go live of this, the geography was a really big consideration that we wanted to make sure people were cognizant of. So effectively, we're still going to have the 3 areas, so 3 separate community teams. We've got one for Perth City. We've still got the community team up in the north of Perthshire, with officers based at both Blairgowrie and Pitlochry, and we've still got the 3 stations in South Perthshire at Kinross, Aughter, Ardor, and Kinross, Aughter, Crieff. So we've still got all the police offices fully staffed with community officers, and we've still got that spread of community officers throughout Perth and Kinross for community policing. I hope that answers that query.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks, Stephen, for your presentation. I forgot to thank you at the beginning. Coming back to this subject of speeding again, I'm sorry, it's one that I get swamped with up here in the Glens. Obviously, we accept that we can't have police officers everywhere. There just isn't the resources. I just wonder, do you think, and it's a question I get asked a lot, is there more that can be done to educate people, whether it be at local level or national level? Should there be more done to make speeding socially unacceptable, like drink driving has become over the years? I mean, is there more that could be done to try and reduce this? Because it is serious. I mean, when I learned to drive, which is terrible to say 50 years ago, my uncle taught me to drive. I think the first thing he told me was, when I sat behind the wheel, was you are sitting in a legal licensed killing machine. It will kill people and it can kill you. I've never forgotten that when I drive. It's something you always remember. So is there more that we could do to people, to educate people, whether young people, old people, whatever, to the dangers of speeding? There's more should be done.
Yep. Sorry, I think messaging is a big part of that, and just getting across to people the dangers, as you say. And I don't know if you saw, I think it was a couple of months ago, there was a really impactful advert. It was a national advert that went out on the TV in relation to speeding, and it was quite a hard-hitting national TV campaign. And Police Scotland do, along with the council, look to do national campaigns in relation to speeding, and we certainly do a lot of work out in the communities. I think there was quite a bit of work with the road policing unit and local policing unit up at the Falls of Brewer within the past few months, where we were talking to people about the dangers of speeding and other road offences, if you like. And I'll always say that there's always room for improvement when it comes to safety messaging. I don't think that there can ever be that we're doing enough while we're still seeing those issues on the road. So I'm more than happy to certainly look at what further work we can do, whether that be local engagement or looking at more messaging. But we do it. It is national, it is local, but as always, happy to engage with partners and look to see what further what we can do. I sit on the road traffic meetings that are chaired by the SFRS, and we talk about issues such as speeding regularly, as well as other issues such as drink driving, mobile phones, and what we're doing in relation to that. And we talk about it. We have the national campaigns, the local campaigns such as the Falls of Brewer, but can we do more? I think we can always do more when it comes to safety messaging.
Could I just follow up quickly, Convener, if I may? It was just obviously the Falls of Brewer was a good campaign, I think, but are there plans for more of those to be done over the whole of Perth and Kinross?
Yeah, so we work to, we've actually got a calendar which the road policing unit have, and it's events that run over the course of the year. So there's events planned from now right through the year, which I'm happy to go through with yourself, Councillor Off Table. But we look to run them jointly with local policing, community policing, road policing, SFRS get involved as well. So yeah, there's lots of planned engagement over the coming months.
Thanks for that, and I'll be in touch. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell.
Brief question, but specifically around that last point, and you talked about in this presentation about benchmarking with other forces. There's a number of forces, I'm not sure in Scotland, but certainly down south, offer road safety, speed awareness training as an option when drivers are caught, with a prosecutable, if that indeed is a word, action. Is there any sort of view that this is going to be implemented in Perth and Kinross or more widely across Scotland as part of this awareness and education piece, rather than just continuing to do the same? Thank you.
Sorry, Stephen, you're on mute, I think.
Apologies. Yeah, correct. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there are enhanced driver training and such courses that can be handed down from the sheriff if they deem that appropriate when it comes to sentencing. I'm not sure it's as specific as what you said, perhaps in place in different areas of the country. But yeah, I think that is certainly one of the things that a sheriff can look to impose on somebody.
My understanding, it's not offered as a generally widely as an option.
Yeah, I could certainly have a look into that, but it would be something that COPFS and then the sheriff would look at, and you know, if we've not already got that in place, I'm sure, you know, if they did look to implement that on sentencing, then we could look at courses. But sorry, I'm not that up to speed with the road policing courses that are available.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think you're doing very well, given you came here to talk about community policing and you've been talking about speeding when you're not a traffic cop. So you're doing very well. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much for the presentation, Stephen. I'm looking forward to the community policy, because I think it would help a lot of the rural villages, etc., etc. My concern would be that antisocial behaviour, which is a major problem nowadays, not just affects adults, but it's affecting younger generation. Now, I'm wondering if the education of it would involve more school visits, but not just more school visits, because it's one thing speaking to the children, but I think the adults need to be there as well. I think a parents and children meeting would be very beneficial to explain, because there's so many times that I've experienced youngsters misbehaving and parents are nowhere to be seen. So I'm just hoping that your antisocial, your community policing will make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that one. So I touched on the antisocial behaviour task force meeting that we have with the Safer Communities team in the council, and that's where we discuss ongoing antisocial issues. And one of the things that was brought up at the most recent one was the issues that they're having up in Blairgowrie, and the inspector for that area, James Longdon, he's the community inspector for Perthshire North. He was able to say, this is what we have planned, and hopefully you saw recently there was a wee bit of social media went out from us in relation to some of the planned activity that we took a couple of weeks ago, and that had some real beneficial outcomes. And in relation to engaging with parents, so if we come across a child who is, you know, up to no good, there's a suite of options available to us depending on how severe the antisocial behaviour is, you know. And if we catch them outside drinking in the park, for instance, we'll take them home and speak to them in front of their parents. We'd then have to put on a child concern report, which gets shared with social work, so that they can do all the checks in the background and make sure that there's nothing more untoward that they need to deal with. And that, you know, that's on the lower end of the scale, where people are just up to no good. Where crime is committed, it's a case of children being taken back to their house, charged if appropriate, and then the reports getting put in. So where we do come across antisocial behaviour and we get a hold of these people, they are spoken to in front of their parents. I can't really think of a situation where if somebody was up to no good, we wouldn't be speaking to them in front of their parents or a responsible person. We do engage with schools, especially where we're seeing hotspots. So I think in the likes of Blairgowrie, and we've had it in Perth as well, where we'll go into schools and just talk to classes, teachers in relation to how they're behaving outside of school. So that's ongoing piece of work that we do undertake in conjunction with our school partners. We could look at, you know, if you think it'd be beneficial, we could, you know, potentially look at getting together a group of children and parents. It's probably something that we would have to look at with the council and schools and come up with a joint approach towards that, I would think.
Thank you very much. And our last question is Councillor James.
Thanks, convener, and thanks for the presentation, Stephen. Really interesting times, and I really feel for yourself and the whole of the force. You know, trying to fit £10 of rubbish into a £5 sack. My question is pretty parochial, if I'm honest, because we're coming into silly season. And with silly season, you get the nicer weather and people want to be out and about camping. I'm talking in my ward, Strathay. We're out at Clooney Loch, where in the past we've had a stabbing, we've had sexual assault and numerous vandalism cases against nature and everything else. In this, and I'll be honest with you, the police have been very good and responsive in association with our rangers, which we employed during the summer. That service is probably not as good as we'd like it this year, but with this reshuffle, will there still be the same level of response to incidents like those at Clooney, please? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor. The short answer is yes. I can't see any way in which there would be any reduction in the amount of police, response that you'll get. And in fact, I would expect it to be better, if anything. Now that the community teams have got more time to concentrate on being proactive in their patrols in their local areas, I would expect more visibility, not less. And the response, if it's an emergency, again, now that the officers are freed up, if you like, and have less responsibility in relation to less immediate crime, I would expect, to be a better response.
Thank you very much. And could I say, Councillor James, the Safer Communities team's role at Clooney Loch and others is not changing going forward. It just becomes part of the normal service. So there doesn't need to be an extra line in the budget for it. So there's no change in that service, as you indicated in your question. Yes. So, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, convener. This question really is about training of community police officers, and indeed probably some response officers as well. Some years ago, it feels like now, a long time ago, Councillor Ahern probably will remember better than me, but there was some discussion at the Community Justice and Safety Partnership about training for police officers when they would respond to an incident where someone perhaps had either mental health or more importantly, a learning disability. And police officers at that time indicated they didn't have specific dedicated training on how to recognise what was going on, particularly if people were reacting in what might have been perceived as a violent or aggressive manner, even if it's verbal. So I'm just wondering if there's additional training being put in place for community police officers to be able to A, recognise and B, be able to de-escalate incidents that might happen where the people involved might have, like I said, a learning disability. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm not aware that there's any specific training as part of the rollout of the enhanced community model as such, but what there has been an improvement in training, specifically in relation to mental health issues, our officer safety training. So that's a course that everybody gets on an annual basis, and whilst it concentrates on how we respond to immediate incidents whereby there's an officer safety requirement. So part of that training, we've had various amendments to it. There's a lot of first aid, a whole day dedicated to first aid, and just it's not just about identifying mental health issues, it's about identifying if somebody's, for instance, got a sugar imbalance which is causing them to act differently than how they would normally act. So there is training in place through OST. We've had online training added in recent years in relation to mental health and just our overall trauma-informed response as well. So there is training in place, and obviously it's not to the same extent as NHS partners and things like that, because they're a totally different service. But I think for us, just that awareness of mental health immediate incidents is better now than it ever has been. I would say that probably the response policing have more of a part to play in that, because what we'll probably find is that if somebody's in a mental health crisis, that will be an immediate response call. So not saying that the community teams won't or don't need that same training, but response police will be the ones that come into contact with people in real mental health crisis on a more consistent basis. And yes, there has been an improvement in training over the past few years, both in terms of how we engage with people with mental health issues and identifying mental health issues.
So thank you. I'm familiar with the mental health rollout that's been taking place in the work with the Scottish Ambulance Service, but this was more, my question was really more specifically about people with learning disabilities who may have communication challenges, etc. And have there been any training on that? I know at one point there was some training to identify people with ADHD, for example, because the way they communicate and the way that they respond, and very often it is at a local level. You know, they might respond in a way that other people might perceive it as being, you know, aggressive.
Yes, so as I was saying, part of the OST is just about identifying people who maybe communicate differently through either a learning disability, a mental health issue, or a medical need at that time. So yes, there have been improvements. What I would say though is, you know, when we've got that baseline communication, but where we do look at going down a pathway of, you know, charging somebody, for instance, or interviewing people, then it's a case of we need to get appropriate adults in place, and the appropriate adult scheme, as you'll be aware, just ensures that people have an understanding of what is going on, and we need that for legal reasons going forward. But I suspect your question is more in relation to general when we come into contact with people. And yes, there have been improvements. As you will know, I always think there's room for improvement in everything that we do. And I would say that about most things that we deal with. But, you know, I've been in the police now for 20 years and it's night and day compared to what it was when I first joined the police. But as I would say with everything, there's always room for improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you for your presentation that you've given today. I think it does identify a lot of the things as councillors we hear in the community. And I do think that the changes you're describing could have a huge impact about that visibility and better engagement with the community itself. You had a questions around about communications of this with the public. I think that as councillors, because we're proactive on these type of subjects, we've seen this coming. I'm not sure the public are fully aware yet. And I do wonder whether engagement with community councils, I know when, and Councillor Braun, I'm sure will support me on this, that when we're at community council, there is a rather deflation, that there is less police engagement than there has been in the past. And I think they look for that engagement from yourselves on matters. And I think that would be a very good way for that to also get into the public domain.
Yeah, we could perhaps look at the community officer attending that meeting to give a similar input to what I've done today, and that might be of benefit to the local groups and may help get that message across slightly better.
Yep, thank you very much. And we're going to one last final question from Bailey Brock.
Thank you, Convener. Can I just first of all say that the community officer has been at every community council meeting in my ward and put over the new policing policy to them. So that was just, but one of the things I wanted to ask was, through the new community policing model, has consideration been taken in on the expansion of certain areas? And I'm actually looking at Kinross, Ofter, Arder and Crieff, where there's been the expansion of additional house building and so obviously there's more in these areas. So I just wondered if consideration has been taken for more community officer presence, because I know they're quite widespread over these 3 areas. So if there's additional officers being put into to look and resource these areas that have got additional housing in it now.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the additional housing will fall into the areas as they are. So the officer for that area will then take into account that area. Are we going to get more officers because there's more houses? The answer probably to that is no, I would suspect, but that is not something that I'm involved in, unfortunately.
Okay, that's good to know.
That was a straight answer. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for answering all these questions. I'm sure we'll hear about this again down the line when you actually get some outcomes from this change of model.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. We now move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is UK Town and Culture 2028. Can I ask Julie Barnsley, the Economic Development Officer, to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. I'm pleased to introduce this report, which provides an update on the UK Town of Culture 2028 and sets out the competition process, the criteria used for assessment, and next steps. This is a new UK-wide competition which has been introduced by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and is inspired by the UK City of Culture. By highlighting the creativity, heritage and community pride in towns, the competition aims to support places to tell their story, widen participation in culture and create economic opportunity through a programme of cultural activity. Cultural programmes generate measurable economic benefits by helping to attract increased visitor numbers, supporting local businesses and creating employment opportunities within the cultural and hospitality sectors. Within Perth and Kinross, 2 organisations have come forward with strong ambitions to take part. Creative Crieff is submitting a bid for Crieff and Strathearn, and Pitlochry Community Action Trust is submitting a bid for Pitlochry. Officers are working closely with both organisations to support their expression of interest applications, which must be submitted by the 31st of March. Even at bidding stage, towns can benefit from strengthened partnership working and enhanced visibility. Should Crieff and Pitlochry progress in the competition, this bidding process would leverage these advantages, amplifying the role of culture as a creative culture as a driver of inclusive economic growth across Perth and Kinross. Supporting these bids aligns closely with our culture strategy and our wider commitment to strengthening cultural participation across Perth and Kinross. It also complements Perth's status as the UK's only UNESCO City of Craft and Folk Art and reinforces our ambitions for a vibrant and inclusive cultural landscape across our region. Shortlisted towns will be announced later this spring, and each will receive £60,000 to develop their full application. The UK Town of Culture 2028 winner will be announced early next year and will receive the £3 million prize to deliver their cultural programme during 2028. 2 runners-up will each receive £250,000 to deliver elements of their programme. This report makes 3 recommendations. Firstly, we're committed to note that Creative Crieff and Pitlochry Community Action Trust intend to submit expressions of interest and that officers are supporting both organisations in preparing their bids. Secondly, to agree that Perth and Kinross Council will support both expressions of interest and provide officer assistance as required throughout this process. And finally, to request that the strategic lead for economy, development and planning brings a further update to a future meeting of this committee or to council as appropriate. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have Kirsty Easton, our Business Place and Investment Team Leader, and Poppy Jarrett, the UNESCO Programme Officer, to assist in any questions. So do we have any questions from council? Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks very much for that. I just have got one question, and it's on the section about shortlisting, which was where we said that it was point 6.3, I think, on page 16, where you said that there would be £60,000 made available for those who were shortlisted. And I was just wondering two things. Number one, who is it that's making the £60,000 available? I assume it's the people who are running the competition, but just for clarification. And how is it anticipated that that £60,000 would be used to build the further case? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The £60,000 is being offered by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, so the organisers. In terms of how that money can be used, it's really up to the bidding towns to decide how to use it. Examples have been such as bringing in consultants that may help produce the report, because there will be quite a lot of information required for them to put forward a really good case when they complete the full application. But it really is very much open and up to those that are applying.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to ask, with regard to section 5 of the report and the lead organisation within the partnership, are Creative Creef and the Pitlochry Community Action Trust, have they taken on the role of lead in for their respective towns? And if we were in the happy position that they were both shortlisted, I wouldn't see how the council could act as lead for both. So it was just to have some clarification as to who's taking a lead, and has the council considered how it might work if both towns are shortlisted.
Thank you for your question. Both Creative Creef and Pitlochry Community Action Trust have indicated that they will lead their bids. The local authority has to have a dedicated role within each bid. So once we get beyond the EOI stage, if we are shortlisted, we will need to have a conversation with them about how they see us fitting into that and what our role will be. But we will have to very much be involved as part of the partnership that's taken.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions. So I will move the report. This report provides an update on the UK Town and Culture 2028. This new UK-wide competition seeks to recognise and celebrate the cultural, social and economic contributions of towns. Such programmes act as a catalyst for local economic growth, attract increased visitor numbers, stimulating town centre activity, creating employment within the cultural and hospitality sectors, and leveraging substantial inward investment. With an emphasis on placemaking, community participation and the development of strong local narratives, the UK Town and Culture aligns directly with our own strategic ambitions, in particular Perth and Kinross Council's cultural strategy approved by this committee, which prioritises widening access to culture, strengthening placemaking and supporting creative communities across all localities. With a focus on local storytelling, inclusive participation and partnership-led cultural delivery, the competition reflects the cultural strategy, strategic pledges and offers an opportunity to enhance cultural engagement and visibility across our region. This report seeks approval from members of this committee that offers support the expressive interest commissioned by UK Town and Cultures 2028 from Creef and Strathern via Creative Creef and Pitlochry via Pitlochry Community Action Trust, and that offers continue to work collaboratively with both groups. Shortlisted towns will be announced in spring 2026, and this report asks that the Strategic Lead of Economic Development and Planning reports back to this future meeting of the Council? I'm happy to accept the recommendations in this report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor McCall to second, please?
Thank you, Convener. I'm very pleased to second this report, and I'm equally pleased that we have two expressions of interest throughout Perth and Kinross area. I wish to wish both bids good luck, and I'm hopeful and confident that they will generate some new ideas and some greater community engagement in the preparation of these bids. So happy to move to second the report, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments on the report? No, I don't have any comments on the report, so we're happy to agree the recommendations. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is mid-market rent proposal. And I ask Elaine Richards, Strategic Lead of Housing and Communities, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to introduce the mid-market rent proposal report being presented today. This paper outlines an important opportunity for Perth and Kinross Council to strengthen our affordable housing offer and to respond more effectively to the growing pressure on our local housing system. As members are aware, demand for affordable housing continues to rise across Perth and Kinross, particularly amongst households who do not qualify for social housing or who are increasingly priced out the private rented and owner-sectored markets. These pressures are especially acute in areas with above average rental costs, limited supply and high levels of housing need. At present, our ability to support these households depends largely on the capacity of our partner registered social landlords delivering mid-market rent. While this partnership working has been positive, the current scale of delivery is not keeping pace with the housing needs we are seeing across our communities. This report therefore brings forward a proposal for the Council to take a more active and flexible role in delivering mid-market rent. It seeks approval to adopt mid-market rent as an additional affordable housing model for the Council, and crucially to begin the process of establishing a limited liability partnership. This would allow us for the first time to deliver directly mid-market rent homes in a way that is financially sustainable, legally compliant and aligned to our long-term strategic goals. Members will note that the proposal is grounded in extensive cross-service work, legal and financial due diligence and engagement with councils already delivering mid-market rent successfully. The paper presents a clear business case demonstrating that the limited liability partnership model offers the strongest and most future-proof option for Perth and Kinross, enabling us to support households who are currently fall between existing tenures while reinforcing our commitment to high-quality, secure, affordable homes. The initial phase of 13 new homes at Westfields Rattray provides a manageable and fully costed starting point. The financial appraisal confirms that the required council borrowing will be repaid in full over 30 years, with any long-term surplus reinvested into additional affordable housing. Importantly, this approach strengthens housing choice, helps relieve pressure on frontline services and complements the ambitions set out in the local housing strategy and strategic housing investment plan. In summary, this proposal represents a significant step forward in expanding the range of affordable options available to local residents, ensuring the Council can respond more effectively to changing patterns of need and supporting our wider vision of Perth and Kinross, where everyone can live life well, free from poverty and inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first question is from Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. And it's welcome for this new approach. My question is on how it's going to be operated once it's running, because you're running a scheme with an RSL. And it does say in the report that other RSLs can be involved in it and produce properties into it. Are they able to then, if they have properties on mid-market rent, are they going to be able to do that independently, or is it going to be similar to housing at the moment where there's a common allocations policy? So if you apply for a house, you have to go through the normal list. And is there going to be a separate list for this, or is it going to be taken from the current list? And if there is a separate list, are they going to have the same restrictions that points can be put into there and so people can move up and down the list? How's it going to be administered?
To your question, It will be administered, but it won't be similar to our common housing register. It'll be managed by our private rented sector housing team. Properties will be advertised, and we will agree what the allocation policy will be. It'll vary dependent on that community, and that's what the real flexibility that mid-market rent provides. It allows us to respond to local need. So therefore, there will be some sort of waiting list, but it'll be dependent on the size and the composition of those households. So it's very separate from our social housing waiting list register. It won't be managed by the housing options team. It'll be managed by the private rented sector team. And as properties become available, they'll be advertised. And there will be a criteria set, but that will be dependent on that local need. So it might be dependent on the size of the properties, what the pressures are in those communities as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, convener. Excuse me. Thanks, Elaine. I actually really enjoyed reading that report because it made much clearer to me what mid-market rent was all about, and so it was educational. Thanks for that. I've got 3 brief questions on point 5.5. The first of those was, I'm not clear as to what the meaning of commuted sums is. It says in there that the total amount will include commuted sums of £220,000. So I wonder if you could just tell me what those commuted sums are, where that money comes from. Do you want all 3 of my questions just now, or would you rather one at a time? The second one was from the end of that paragraph where it says that once the initial investment has been repaid, any surplus generated will be reinvested. I just wonder, in what way could surplus be generated? And my third question was, what will happen if general economic turmoil, for instance, costs rising because of what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, made the costs go up? How would we deal with that situation? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Mayor. So the first one, commuted sums, and Serge, you can come in here, but I'll put it in plain English. When private developers are building and they can't make their proportion of affordable housing, they have to provide a financial sum, and that's what we call a commuted sum. Is that helpful? I could describe that a bit more, but I think that's plain English there. So that's what the commuted sum is. In terms of the surplus generated, so there's when if there's income will come in through the rents, and that will generate a bit of a surplus, and that's where that surplus comes from, any additional income we get through rents or the service charge put in there. But these will be priced at affordable housing based on the local housing level rate, but it will generate a bit of a surplus based on that, and that's how we do our modelling in order to generate that wee bit of surplus, but again reinvesting back into mid-market rent itself. And the last question, in terms of if the turmoil, there's an exit strategy within the business case. So what would happen if we couldn't afford it? The HRA would come in and buy them because we have a significant demand for housing, or a housing association might want to buy these properties off us, or we put them on the open market and sell them privately. So there is a limited risk there to the council in terms of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, convener. I'm just wanting some clarification on what we were actually agreeing today. I always thought that mid-market rent was one of the approved definitions of affordable housing that the council had agreed, and it was really just to find out, what is still to be agreed and by whom with regard to kind of recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Thanks. Is it the full council? Is it finance and resources? And it just sounded like we were going to be agreeing things twice to me. So.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. So just to clarify, we're here to approve that we're going to adopt this, and it's because of the limited liability partnership. We can't set that up. We can't deliver, the council can't deliver mid-market rent. We need to set up that partnership. So that's what we're seeking approval to progress with that proposal, and to take a paper to full council on that, but also to full council to borrow the money from general fund. We can't, the scheme of delegation for this committee, we cannot authorise that because we're borrowing from general fund, because we can't fund it through the HRA. So we're seeking approval here to take a further paper to full council in order to borrow and lend to the local a limited partnership of 1.38 million to allow us to acquire the 13 new build properties. And also we're seeking approval that that we bring a progress report back to this council in terms of our progress on our mid-market rent proposal and the scheme for the 13 properties.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I've got quite a few questions on this, but I'll come back in with my future ones after others have asked. I'm also asking specifically about 5.5. So we're going to build 13 new homes, and are we then going to acquire some others, or is it 13 new homes, the money goes back into the pot and we continue to build?
Yeah, so we are building 13 new homes using that money along with Scottish Government funding, along with commuted sums, and along with borrowing from general fund. And once it's kind of like reinvested, and it'll wash its face within 30 years, that money comes back that we then reinvest, so we don't need to borrow off the general fund. It becomes self-financing.
Do we have, it's possibly in here and I've possibly missed it, and if so I apologise, do we have a target for a number of homes over a certain period of time, say in 5 years or something?
So we don't have it in our local housing strategy. We have a target of over 1,050 properties over the 5 years and an annual target of 210. And within that annual target, 70% of that is social housing and 30% is affordable housing. So it's that 30% that we're targeting here, because we've really struggled to meet that 30%.
So that 30% then, you said was affordable. Is that then broken down into mid-market rent and affordable? And if so, what's the breakup of that 30%?
So that 30% includes mid-market rent, but also low-cost home ownership. And we can maybe get James or Nicola to maybe clarify.
Well, what I'm really trying to get at is, in 5 years or 10 years, how many of these houses will we have? That's what I'm trying to get to.
I'll come in, sorry, from the back of the room. In terms of the 30% is around affordable housing as opposed to social rent. So that figure doesn't split down any further, but it could be, as Elaine has said, low cost home ownership or mid-market rent. In terms of what is likely to come forward through the LLP, we're starting with 13, and then it will be the opportunities that come forward to us. So it will be dependent on the sites where we think it's appropriate to take forward mid-market rent. So there's no specific target that the LLP will have, but we're trying to achieve that 30% each year. So the 30% of the 210.
Can I also add, we're borrowing from the general fund, but we're using this as a demonstration project. We could get private financing as well. So again, it's not going back to the general fund. And if we were able to get private financing, that would again add to the numbers that we're able to build as well. So again, it's allowing us to, it's a starting position, but based on other local authorities, it opens up so many more avenues in terms of acquiring more stock as you go.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just wondering what sort of timescale we've got to set this partnership up, because reading the way I read it through the lines is that the Scottish Futures are not clearly quite on board yet, and I know that from the planning side that Westfields is that the developer is looking to develop and start as soon as possible, and I assume these properties will come on first. So do we have some sort of timescale to get this fit, and will we be ready to take the properties on as they come?
Hand over to James, but my understanding, we've done a lot of the groundwork already in terms of seeking external legal advice and whatnot, but my understanding was 6 months from the date of approval of both today's decision and also full council to get it up and running. But I'll just double check and maybe being optimistic.
Yeah, the LLP itself will take around 6 months after approval. That is well in advance of the completion of the properties at Westfield Battery, so we'll have ample time for the LLP to be formed prior to those properties being handed over. So they're very much being coordinated, and as I say, plenty of time in advance of completion.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. My question is just really for further information and relates to 4.1, where it states in Perth and Kinross, demand for mid-market rent continues to grow, particularly in areas of high housing pressure. It goes on to say current supply through partner RSLs is not keeping pace with the need. And I just wonder, is it possible to quantify what that level of that unmet demand, or what that need is, in terms of just getting a sense of what the nature of the problem is? Thank you.
We don't actually have a figure on the demand, but any time that we do have mid-market rent, we have 3 times the number of applications for housing. Because of the nature of the individuals that target mid-market rent, we don't actually keep a waiting list for people looking for mid-market rent. But based on the schemes that our housing partners have delivered, we've exceeded and disappointed people because we've never had enough stock to meet that need. We're currently undertaking our housing needs demand analysis, and we will get further data on that, but there definitely is the demand, and that's what we're getting through, particularly from our housing options team, that the profile of people applying for housing is changing because they can't access this type of housing, particularly in the private sector, or get on the property market because of they're either outpriced or they can't get a mortgage. So there is definitely the demand there.
Thank you very much. I will go to Councillor Smith for his first question.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. I think it's a really good idea. But the one thing I'd like to be cleared up here is that the people that are in these situations are often in the, let's say, the low income market, etc. Right? Now, let's say, for instance, that we give them a house, and in a year's time, unfortunately, they lose their jobs and they're put back into what situation there is it? Do these people then lose their accommodation? What would happen? Thank you.
No different to MD who gets into financial difficulties. If you're in mid-market rent, or you're in a private sector, or even an owner-occupier, what would happen is you would get support and assistance regarding your situation, and a financial assessment would be carried out on that, and that would vary. So I couldn't really give you an answer on that, but there's lots of help out there for individuals who are in financial difficulties, and the aim of the local authority is to sustain people in their properties where possible to prevent homelessness.
And just the worry I would have is that in the Blairgowrie area, for instance, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people employed in the chicken situation up there or whatever, and all of a sudden you can imagine a whole company goes to the wall and a whole load of people lose their jobs. It just frightens me that the mid-market is set for these people, and it's a great thing to help them. Now, all of a sudden, all the houses, you know, you could end up with a lot of people unemployed, and I can see what you're saying about the help, etc. But it just worries me. But thanks for your reply. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the rent of these properties will be set at the local housing rate level, which is in line with housing benefit and things like that as well. So again, in terms of that financial affordability, that's all taken into consideration when we're developing these models.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Elaine. This is really quite an exciting entrepreneurial approach, I would say, and well done to all that have come forward with this potential solution. Do you see this also having a positive impact on our general housing demand for our own stock? And it'll take a little bit of time to settle down, work through. Say maybe in 5 years we should see us to be more on the front foot with housing supply. And also, could I just maybe throw in at the end, I talk about rural housing a lot. Is this something that we can look at in rural areas?
Thanks for those really interesting questions. Yes, it'll create, and I'm sorry for the word, vacancy chains. So in terms of, there might be people in our social housing that really want to access this type of housing. So then it frees up social housing for people in particular housing need that safety net. So most definitely there. And also help expand our housing options, particularly for people who are either in under-occupying accommodation as well, because mid-market rent allows people to have accommodation of an extra bedroom, things that you can't get in social housing. So it does provide that. most definitely for rural communities, because with mid-market rent, as I said at the very first question, we can tailor the criteria to meet the local community. So I know in some rural areas, it's meeting local housing needs. That's what my teams always get. These houses should go to people who live in the local area, and that is what mid-market rent really provides. So really positive for rural communities.
And of course, the first houses are in a rural area. Councillor Barrett, for your second question.
Thanks, Convener. Kind of going back to Councillor Forbes' questions, I'm thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there must be a kind of minimum level where the limited liability partnership or the administration will achieve economies of scale and management efficiencies. So with regard to the growth of the mid-market rent property portfolio, where do we see that we need to get to in order to achieve those? Is it 100 properties? Is it 200 properties? And do we have an idea over what period of time we're looking to grow it to reach that?
I can come in terms of that. We don't have that target set in terms of the 100, the 150 units. What we're looking at the minute is the 13 units. We're ensuring that that is financially viable and taking that forward. But as there's lots of commentary around it. What it creates is that ability to, be it in rural areas or wherever where we don't have that option at the minute, we could look for. We're taking the 25%, so let's take it as a normal developer scheme. 25% is affordable housing. We can consider a share of that being mid-market rent, which we're not able to deliver ourselves at the minute. So it will slowly build that picture, but we haven't calculated that we need 100. It's scheme by scheme. Each scheme needs to be financially viable.
I was writing something down there. Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Elaine, I'm pretty confident in this document it will tell me the answer to my question, but I'm afraid I just can't find it. But are we going into partnership with someone else? And if so, who?
So yes, we need to go into partnership because as a local authority, we cannot deliver mid-market rent. So it's the limited partnership model that we're delivering, and it will be a partner. So it's Scottish Futures Trust that we've been discussing with, because that's with Stirling and Edinburgh. That's who initially did their scheme, and they've said there's a bit of a willingness there. We still need to dot the I's and cross the T's. So they are a partnership that we would go into with, and that takes that liability from the council onto that partner. And as a result, we set up a board, and on that board will be that partner plus ourselves and elected members. And under that board, there will be an operational board.
So why them? Or did we look at perhaps doing it with one of the housing associations that's listed, given that they've already got houses there? Could we have gone into business with them? And my second bit of that question is, what's the benefit to the partner? What do they get out of this?
So yeah, we could have went in partnership with an RSL, but we've decided to go with the limited liability partnership just for the better control. We would have more control doing it our own, rather with an RSL would be a wee bit constricted with the criteria, with the policy. It's just that control element, and that's why we went with that. Sorry, second question. Sorry, I forgot the second one.
Thank you. And I just wondered what's in it for them. Are they in this just to make money? Is that the sole purpose of what they do? Or is there some other reason that they would help us with this?
It's non-profit making. It's a charity based. They do not make a profit out of it. That's their expertise. That's what they are set up to do. They get government funding. They're not in it to make any financial benefit. It's more to increase what they do as a partnership. And maybe James or Nicola might.
Yeah, the second member don't get anything out of it. Futures Trust are themselves an arm's length of the Scottish Government, and they're seeking to promote ventures like this. So they do it based on the principle of the thing. That's why they become second members. That's also why it can be quite restrictive in terms of who the second member can be. So whilst in principle we could go to an RSL, because there isn't really anything in it for them, they're unlikely to agree to something like that. So Scottish Futures Trust are adept at this type of thing. They've done it before. They can provide us with the necessary support to get the LLP up and running in a good manner. And within the LLP itself, just in terms of kind of profit, monies cannot be extracted from the LLP. Part of the governance arrangements dictate that any surplus or any profit needs to be retained within the LLP and be directed towards future investment in affordable housing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Convener. Elaine, you said that we would have more control using this method, and in point 3.1 under background and context, it says that applicants would have to meet specific eligibility criteria to be offered such a tenancy, and that criteria could be decided by the landlord to meet local housing need. I wonder, does that mean we would then have the ability to sort of socially engineer that we would have particular employees being offered housing to meet the need? For instance, in an area where we were very short of social care workers, would we be able to sort of prioritise that they get the housing so we can fill both the houses and a need in the community? Thank you.
Yes, most definitely, and we classify that as key worker accommodation, so we've already got a policy strand on that. But in terms of the criteria, it's quite flexible, but income level, going back to a point raised before, is one of those areas. The ability to afford the rent, housing need within that local area, so employment might be one area, whether or not the person has a local connection. We can also look at tenancy readiness. These things we cannot do under social housing, so there's elements there that we've got a wee bit more control over in terms of meeting local demands, and also creating sustainable communities as well, particularly if we've got a difficult site, as Nicola alluded to, that we want a real mix of types of housing and options within there as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Convener, and I welcome the work that's been done to essentially sort of look to provide what would seem to be a good solution for what is an important area of the housing market. I guess the key thing for me is to ask, this is of pilot dimensions, and ultimately, I think we've already heard that where mid-market rent has been offered by RSLs and others, that demand has exceeded availability. So my specific question is, how do we scale this, and specifically when we are currently considering the next local development plan, LDP3, how do we then look to sort of use that stage that LDP3 is at to say that in actual fact there's an opportunity here to really sort of push this at scale? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as you say, quite an important stage of LDP3. In terms of the decisions that we make through that, it's really about the location and where we want to create those allocations. And I know there's plenty of conversations around rural locations. We've seen through LDP2 some really quite large strategic sites around Perth, which are continuing to build out. So it's about filling some of that void with some of the smaller sites and looking in more rural areas as well. In terms of where mid-market rent plays out, it is simply that the 25% will come forward, assuming that's what carries forward into LDP3, and it gives us that option with the direct control that the council will have to start delivering mid-market rent. So it doesn't fundamentally change the delivery of affordable housing. It simply gives the council that bit more control on the tenure.
So again, I think they're really good points you raised, Councillor Welsh, and it's something we will also consider when we are updating our strategic housing investment plan, which we do every October. So again, we can maybe frame that in terms of this is not a pilot where it's small to get us off the bench as such. We see this as having a real impact in terms of meeting housing need and doing things a bit differently as well, and giving us that flexibility, because there's opportunities that we have to pass by because we can't do it as a social landlord. This is another strand to our bow which will allow us to maybe buy portfolios within the private sector that we can't currently buy and things like that. So it gives us a lot more flexibility and opens up much more options. But I see what you say in terms of what's our target. I've listened to that today, and that's something we can maybe include within the next iteration of our SHIP, which comes to council in October.
Thank you. That's really helpful. All I would encourage you to do is also, from a partnership or a collaborative perspective, there's a lot of activity in this market, because there's a lot of money looking to find homes to invest in, and where we can be part of that to allow us to essentially make it scalable. We need to make sure that we're in discussions with as many people as possible, because I think we are offer a strong partnership capability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions in the chat, so I will now move the report. I am very pleased to have this paper in front of us to allow the council to further tool to help deliver much needed affordable housing. Mid-market rent is an affordable housing tenure aimed at households on low to moderate incomes who are unable to access social housing and are priced out of the private rental and home ownership options. There is an evidence need for mid-market rent housing, and there is growing by the day by many residents within our communities. Whilst the affordable housing supply programme in Perth and Kinross is functioning well, with the yearly target of 210 newly affordable homes being met, the specific target to deliver mid-market rent homes has not been achieved. It will not be achieved if we continue as business as usual. Mid-market rent proposal is backed by a detailed business case that has identified the LLP as the best model for Perth and Kinross to deliver mid-market rent directly, and a robust financial appraisal undertaken by the first tranche of properties for Westfields in Rattray. Establishing a council-controlled vehicle to deliver mid-market rent not only offers opportunities for inward investment to the council, but more importantly seeks to help achieve our aim that everyone in Perth and Kinross has access to the right home in the right place at the right cost. I'm happy to accept the recommendations in the report and move the paper as approved. Can I ask Councillor McCall to second the report, please?
Thank you, Convener. Colleagues, before us today, we have the opportunity to expand our offering of additional affordable housing in Perth and Kinross via a mid-market LLP model, which is very welcome and an exciting opportunity for Perth and Kinross Council and all of our residents, and in particular in some of our more rural communities where there's less of a legacy of social housing availability to either rent or buy back. It also offers more flexibility and control to develop smaller, targeted developments in response to housing need and community need in all areas. This is a proposition that Councillor McEwen and I have been championing for several years now, so I'm very pleased that this report has been brought forward to us today, and I want to thank all of the officers for their work in examining the options and in bringing this proposal to life, and in particular answering lots of my daft questions. Councillors, I am therefore very pleased to second this report and its recommendations, and I would recommend it to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we move to comments. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener, and I'm also very pleased to see this paper come to committee today. As the Vice Convener said, there's been a lot of discussion for a number of years about the Council progressing development of mid-market rent properties and whatever sort of special purpose vehicle or partnership was required to advance that. So it is really good to see a recommendation today that distills that down to the limited liability partnership, and we can stop talking about how we're going to develop mid-market rent houses and move towards hopefully quickly establishing the body and then on to actually building houses. It's also very good to see that the first planned development is in Rattray Blair Gowrie, particularly because I think members of this committee and other members of the council may have wrongly perceived that mid-market rent would be a Perth City phenomenon only, and it's great that the first development will demonstrate that mid-market rent is a useful tool to deliver affordable rented housing in our rural towns and make inroads, as was said, into addressing those particular rural housing needs. Needless to say, I hope that our Perth City project will follow in quick succession, and that we can look at the property mix at the leisure centre Glover Street site, which I think has significant housing potential for what proportion is right for that site. I think when you look at the potential funding that is available from the Scottish Government, £1.2 million is almost equal to the council investment of 1.38 million. That's the council seeking to put into the limited liability partnership. It only serves to illustrate, what we've been missing out on in terms of investment in our housing in our area to date. So I want to thank officers for the work that they've done across a variety of services, as we've seen today. I know that it hasn't been easy, and I'm sure that the efforts will pay further dividends as the limited liability partnership becomes fully established and its scope of delivery grows. I think the only note of caution I'd want to insert is that I think that we need to have a closer look at the growth strategy for mid-market rent and how we take that forward, rather than it just being an opportunity-led process. I think if we are going to, operate efficiently and generate the scale, economies of scale that we require, then that's something maybe not for today, but certainly for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I welcome this. As I think most of you know, I know a little bit about the rental market. I'm pleased to see that Elaine and her team are once again at the forefront and the cutting edge of doing these things differently. That's a really good step in the right direction. I think, as Elaine has acknowledged herself, the idea of having some kind of target has been raised by a few of us today, and I think that's something that's really important, because our role as elected members is to scrutinise the council and its operations, and I think without any indication of what we hope to achieve over what timescale, then it'll be very difficult for us or whoever sits in these desks in the future to provide the level of scrutiny that we're here to do. But I think Elaine has acknowledged that already, so I'm delighted to see that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I just wanted to add my support to this. I know we discussed this in the past. It's certainly going to fill a gap in our armoury, if we put it that way, another string to our bow. I think there's a demand for mid-market rent, and it's obviously that our team, and thanks to Elaine and all the team, who've obviously worked their way through this carefully to ensure that we are covered legally and financially to proceed with this. But I'm also pleased, of course, that the first 13 properties are going to be in our ward. We know that Rattray is a seriously deprived area. There is a demand there for mid-market rent, and this will satisfy some of that. And it's also pleasing to know it's going to go on an excellent site, which has been worked on by the developers with the local community. A large number of properties going in an area which has been allowed to be neglected over the years. It will certainly be a popular site, I think, and a popular place for people to apply for those properties. So every success here, I'm sure. And again, thanks to Elaine and all the team for working on this and working their way through it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Well.
I'd just like to add my sort of thanks to the housing team. This is an innovative proposal, and appears to be sort of well developed, thought through, and I look forward to seeing it delivered and implemented as part of this administration, and working with others is keen to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no other comments. I'll be happy to agree the recommendations in this report. Thank you very much. That's us at the end of the business on the agenda today. Can I thank everyone for your attendance today and for your contributions, and now formally close the meeting. Thank you.